The problem is that Rachel Reeves, Susie, is not going to be part of the furniture for much longer, is she? She's on borrowed time now.
I mean, I just don't agree. I'm sorry, I don't see this as a big deal.
Go. How dare you?
I don't see this as a big deal. And I'm also a little bit like, how are we being lectured? I'm just feeling Robert Jenrick trying to throw mud at Rachel Reeves.
Rachel Reeves just can't stop lying, and Labour's trying their best to cover it up. Unfortunately, they're incompetent at everything, and her lies are costing them dearly. This time, she won't get away from these lies, and people are demanding her resignation for such a huge fraud. Labour's supporters are coming up with such horrible excuses that they sound straight up delusional. But what is this huge lying scandal, and can Labour defend it?
Have you got some gaps in your CV? Maybe you didn't quite get the promotion you were looking for 3 or 4 years ago, and it's just niggling at you. There it is on your LinkedIn profile saying you were only in the retail banking division. You weren't quite the economist you'd hoped to become. I have some good news for you. Apparently, you can just change it and say whatever the hell you like, if you happen to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves.
Rachel Reeves has a knack for lying, and this case is no different. Her LinkedIn was recently revealed to reflect the actual truth about her career and credentials. But the real question is, why is she getting away with it? It is unheard of for a high-ranking government official to lie about their credentials like this, and even after doing that, she gets to keep her job. Where's the media coverage? Where's the accountability and transparency that Starmer keeps talking about?
Here we have a before and after. What does this show you? Well, this is from the Chancellor's own LinkedIn, who apparently, when she's not going to war with pensioners and farmers who are pensioners, she has some time to adjust her own LinkedIn profile. Maybe she's looking for a new job soon. Here we have at the top, before, economist at the Bank of Scotland, very impressive. And then after, retail banking in Halifax. Well, that's not exactly the same thing, is it? Something has happened here. She's changed this whilst at the Treasury.
Quite a leap for the Chancellor to go from retail banking to an economist. That's like comparing oranges to apples. If that doesn't sound as bad, wait till you find out about the details of her job. This is your Chancellor who has dubious credibility as an economist and continues to pass horrible economic policies. How she has dealt with the farmers, pensioners, businesses, and just the working class Brit is horrendous. Everything just makes a lot more sense now.
Now, that is not the only problem. It's not just this LinkedIn chicanery which is causing some issues. It also turns out that her tenure at the Bank of England is under scrutiny as well. In 2021, she said she worked at the Bank of England as an economist for 10 years, a full decade. Except now she's saying she's only been there for 6 years. Was it 6 years or was it 10? That's quite a big difference. You'd think she'd know. After all, it's, we're dealing with numbers here. Can't you count to 10?
You'd expect that the person responsible for managing a country's finances would know how to do simple math. It's not even an honest mistake because you can't confuse 10 years with 6. Besides, did she expect anyone to buy that she has been an economist for a decade? Her economic plans look like something a toddler came up with. The work of someone who has no idea about what they're doing. It got significantly worse as Labour tried to defend her in the most horrible way possible.
And the spokesperson was asked, do you have anything to say about this seeming change to the Chancellor's LinkedIn profile? Isn't it a breach of the ministerial code to be lying about your experience? Apparently the spokesman hadn't even seen this, hadn't seen any of these reports, which were all over the newspapers for the last 2 days. No idea about it, hadn't heard a thing. Certainly hadn't spoken to the Prime Minister about it. And you'd think, well, this might be an important thing. My Chancellor is being accused of potentially breaching the ministerial code.
So apparently the government has no idea what the scandal is. Do they think we're stupid? Labour is hoping that this whole thing just magically goes away and they're trying to avoid it. Probably because they don't have a solid defence. As usual, there's no doubt that they know about it and are just trying to cover it up.
To be asked. They did nonetheless stress that we're rebuilding the foundations of the economy. We're very clear on that, very clear on the £22 billion black hole. That's all, we're across all that. But the fact that she might have totally lied about her CV, never heard anything about it. Now, why does this matter? Well, I would argue this was one of the central principles, one of the main reasons you were supposed to vote for Labour in this election. Openness, transparency, honesty, integrity.
Every argument that the Labour government has is outdated and debunked. They continually talk about this black hole in the public finances and rebuilding the economy, despite Rachel Reeves doing her best to ruin it beyond repair. Why are they feigning ignorance over such a huge matter? Starmer himself should have released a statement, but he did no such thing. Some of the Liberal supporters try to argue that it doesn't matter if she edited her LinkedIn because it's not that important and CVs are different from a LinkedIn profile. Sadly, that couldn't be further from the truth.
How often do you think employers actually print out CVs now versus look at what's online? Often when you apply for a new job, you actually just submit your LinkedIn profile and that is the substitute for your CV. So let's not have any of those arguments that it doesn't really matter, this is fine. I think it does matter because they made this their central plank on the election. They said they would be open and transparent.
LinkedIn is used interchangeably as a CV, and that's common knowledge. Employers use profiles like these to quickly gauge and get a better view of a person's credibility. Speaking of which, Rachel Reeves has ruined all of her credibility. Not that she was any credible to begin with, but Labour did try their best to spin the narrative that she's some almighty economist with a decade of experience. Look how that turned out for this nation. Quite possibly, everyone is mad at her for making their lives miserable.
After all, Rachel Reeves has enraged 10 million pensioners by axing their winter fuel payments, enraged farmers with an inheritance tax raid, and enraged business with a hike on employer national insurance contributions, which the boss of Deutsche Bank this week called a payroll tax, which may lead to 100,000 workers facing unemployment.
No wonder she has earned the nickname of Robber Reeves and Rachel Thieves. People are furious over her policies as they've only served to make things more expensive for everyone. She has made Britain into a nightmare for pensioners by cutting off their fuel allowance, farmers by increasing the inheritance tax, and businesses by forcing them to employ less people or pay higher taxes on each employer. The Labour defence of blaming it on the previous government doesn't work anymore either.
All this negativity has now hit the economy, with new figures this week revealing that growth has dropped from 0.5% under Rishi Sunak in the summer, the highest in the G7, to 0.1% under Sir Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. If only this government had a complaints department like the Halifax do. Now, in my big opinion last month, I said that duplicity and dishonesty are a key feature of this new administration.
Sounds like they got a pretty good deal. One of the highest growing economies in G7 is quite the achievement, and look what Rachel Reeves has turned it into. Maybe if we had an actually qualified chancellor, things would be different. Everything we've seen from this government has so far been lies and more lies. They promised not to raise taxes. Guess what Rachel Reeves did? And yet people still have the audacity to call the story trivial.
Now, this story may seem trivial. After all, my CV says that I'm 28, have a swimmer's build, and played Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. But a pattern is emerging. This is the same Chancellor that said that she did not anticipate raising tax on working people, and has done just that.
Lying about your qualifications is never trivial. It's dishonesty, and she should be held accountable for it. But since Labour doesn't actually believe in transparency and honesty, we're starting to see a pattern. They said they'd support working class people and then went ahead and completely hammered them. The consequences of their rushed and at times completely insane plans have been horrible for this country, and we're the ones who will have to pay for it.
As is inventing a £20 billion black hole, which the OBR has repeatedly said there is no evidence to show has ever existed, whether as a consequence of the last Conservative government or indeed as a consequence of Miss Reeves' rather stupid budget. The problem is that she's not very good at being the Chancellor because, as we now know, she's got about as much economic experience as the table in front of us.
The £22 billion black hole that we keep hearing about has been debunked by the Office of Budget Responsibility. There are no such figures, and the idea that they inherited a bad economy from the previous government is laughable. With each passing day, it becomes more evident that the real culprit is Rachel Reeves and her blunders. Yet, some people still try to defend her.
The problem is that Rachel Reeves, Susie, is not going to be part of the furniture for much longer, is she? She's on borrowed time now.
I mean, I just don't agree. I'm sorry. I don't see this as a big deal.
Go. How dare you?
I don't see this as a big deal. And I'm also a little bit like, how are we being lectured? I'm just feeling Robert Jenrick trying to throw mud at Rachel Reeves. I mean, I'm not going to forget about Robert Jenrick because it was my area where they tried to build a massive development because he did a dodgy deal with Richard Desmond. And then Boris Johnson was like, well, you know, you're too scandalous, I'm kicking you out. So you got him lectured.
At this point, they're just gaslighting themselves into believing that everything is all right. They keep saying that it doesn't matter and that it isn't a huge deal, but you wouldn't go to a doctor who doesn't have the proper degree, would you? The same point applies here, and Rachel Reeves is indeed on borrowed time. Despite Labour's attempts to cover it up, there is no way they could defend it. No amount of ignoring and deflecting will make this go away. What's more delusional is how they try to defend the new budget.
3 weeks off that budget. 3 weeks off. Let's see what happens over the next couple of years. All I'm saying is this, and I would bet, though I'm not a betting person, but I would happily bet that when Labour, in 5 years' time, when we go to the general election, this country's going to be in a better place. Kids are not going to be in porter cabins as they were under the Tories. We're not going to have record waiting lists. And this is the thing. People keep saying this and saying that, but we have to raise money from somewhere.
Wait and find out if the budget works out or not is perhaps the worst argument the Liberals have presented all year. We already know how the stats are looking. There are official reports and the expected growth is abysmal. At this point, lying has become a habit for Rachel Reeves, and it's not just huge lies like the ones on her CV. She tells petty lies as well.
But this is sort of reaching a bit of a head with her, isn't it? You know, first of all, we're told, oh, she was an economist at the Bank of England for 10 years. Well, it looks like she did that job for 6 years. She said, I was also an economist in my first job as for the Halifax Bank of Scotland. In fact, her team now admits she wasn't an economist there. She worked in something called retail banking. So I'm sure she wasn't a cashier, but not much more than that.
The reports have started coming out, and it's been confirmed that she did not work as an economist for 10 years. In fact, she wasn't even an economist, but worked in retail banking during her time in the Bank of Scotland. The best she could have done there is handle complaints and human resources. The lies go further than just employment history. For whatever reason, she told a very petty lie that's meaningless.
She said she was a junior chess champion. Let's go through that just for a second. In the under 12s, junior chess championship in Britain, she came 19th. The following year in the under 13s, she came 29th. And in the under 14s, the year after that, she was 26th. So not really a chess champion. This is getting a bit embarrassing, isn't it?
Turns out that not only did she not work as an economist for 10 years, she also isn't a junior chess champion. Now the question here is, why did she lie about being one in the first place? There's nothing to gain from petty lies like these, and if she had been honest about her employment history from the get-go, she wouldn't be struggling to save her job right now. To say that this behavior is embarrassing would be a huge understatement.
There are many different errors of her CV where it appears she has been, shall we say, economical with the actuality, to use Alan Clark's immortal phrase. It is clearly something that her team are worried about, and it's something I think that obviously has a lot of traction, and it deters from Labour's economic message. They're going to get re-elected in 5 years' time. They need to stop actually embellishing what's going on and start telling the truth about what's happening to the country.
This scandal is incredibly damaging for the Labour Party and their reputation. She made this problem by overvaluing credentials to the point where she felt the need to lie about it. Her team is scrambling to somehow save this messy situation, but they're failing horribly. What's more is that it's damaging the reputation of the whole Labour Party. The very people who argue about transparency and honesty have a chancellor who lies like it's nothing. There's a whole Labour narrative behind this, and it's failing.
An economist at the Bank of England for 10 years, for a decade, and also being an economist up in, for the Halifax Bank of Scotland. That whole narrative is designed to embellish her credentials, as our Chancellor, as the person in charge of the national economy. I mean, it comes to something these days, the biggest exciting claim that most of our politicians make, isn't it, is that I had a job in the real world once.
During the elections, Labour showed off her credentials and praised her as the Chancellor who would fix everything that was wrong with our economy. And now, a few months ahead, she has left nothing that's right with our economy. Would she have gotten this job if she had been honest in her CV? Considering how Labour is incompetent as a whole, it's rather plausible.
But she could have been truthful about her background, and it doesn't look as if she was.
Yeah, and obviously she chose to be defined by credentialism. She said, look, I'm not going to be a great, exciting politician like Boris Johnson or someone like Churchill or Macmillan, but I will promise stability and being boring and being experienced. And of course, now people are saying, hang on a sec, well, your claims don't stack up. You're someone who promised to be wiser than wise.
She chose this narrative and argued for it non-stop, defining herself with credentialism. Now that they've been proven false, her credibility is taking a nosedive. It's not just Starmer who's being blasted for horrible decisions. Rachel Reeves is right there next to him, being hated by the working class Brits. Another huge lie that she's dealing with is the one about inheritance not affecting a lot of farmers.
Because they're trying to say, the Treasury is saying, oh, you know, it doesn't affect that many farmers, 27% maximum, which actually is a pretty big number anyway, isn't it? DEFRA is saying, look, stop telling us to lie. It's 66%. So I'm afraid that Rachel Reeves, with her own life and her political life, is turning out to be something of a spinner extraordinaire.
She's a compulsive liar in her political and personal life. Almost every economic policy she has introduced has been based on a foundation of lies completely debunked. How long can they continue to justify her actions, or will they eventually get rid of her?
Former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said at the budget, under Labour, national insurance is up, capital gains tax is up, inheritance tax is up, energy taxes are up, and stamp duty is up. So perhaps it's no surprise then that inflation is now up too. Indeed, it's above the Bank of England's target rate of 2.3%. In less than 6 months since taking office, Labour's economic agenda has already failed.
One of the last things Rishi Sunak did as the leader of the Tory party was to bash Rachel Reeves and her new budget into the ground. Name a tax and Rachel Reeves will increase it. That's just how Robert Reeves functions. As a direct consequence of this, inflation is up, and if things continue like this, it'll only get higher. Things will get more expensive and countless people will suffer, all because of a lying chancellor.
Indeed, Red Rachel tried to brand her economics doctrine as securonomics, and it was under this further piece of disinformation from Red Rachel that she aimed to build confidence around her, and the idea that she could be trusted. She can't even be trusted with her CV, but certainly not with the economy.
Rachel Reeves has earned another nickname of Red Rachel, and when she was appointed Chancellor, she had a whole thing about creating a secure economy. She promised a stable and growing state of Britain's finances, and to nobody's surprise, that turned out to be a lie as well. There's no way that Rachel Reeves can ever be trusted again, and for good reason.
In spite of claiming they were going for growth, they endlessly undermined the economy and spooked the markets, deterring investment. This was followed by a raw socialist budget that attacked business and the creators of wealth. Worst of all is its $25 billion national insurance raid, a policy that broke its manifesto commitment. It's prompted the Bank of England, hardly a bastion of right-wingery, mainly a left-wing woke organisation, along with Tesco, Asda, Sainsbury's, Boots and Amazon, all to warn of job cuts and price rises.
Remember how Starmer and Rachel were all gloomy and depressed about the economy that they inherited? Turns out that announcing impending doom isn't the best thing to secure investment. Many wealthy people and companies shifted away from Britain as a result. As if that wasn't bad enough, there's now a national insurance rate that's basically a tax on companies for employing workers. Not once did it occur to our bright chess champion, Chancellor Rachel Reeves, that doing so would force companies to reduce the size of their staff and lead to even more unemployment.
Not only will we be a high tax, but also a high regulation economy. Only today, the House of Lords has a bill in committee which will make it easier to adopt the European Union's rules and regulations, as if Brexit had never happened. And we know exactly what that means. More red tape, more regulation, less innovation, less entrepreneurship.
Regulations are through the roof as well. No business can operate under Rachel Reeves' policies without being burdened by a billion different regulations. And now, she's trying to make us an unofficial part of the European Union again. Certainly doesn't seem like the actions of an economist with a decade of experience.
And the public sector is being feather-bedded at the same point, as you say, more money being poured in.
It's a two-tier economy, Jacob. That's what we're seeing. If you're in the public sector, you know, not only are you getting big pay rises, but most of the public sector organisations are being cushioned from these rises by national insurance, by promises of more money, or indeed more money now. If you're in the private sector, or if you're just an individual, a farmer, a pensioner, there's no cushioning at all. In fact, you'll see your bills go up, and if you're paying taxes, you'll see your taxes pay up, and if you're trying to pass on wealth to the next generation, Labour will help themselves to a slice of that too.
Under Secure, everything is two-tier. Even our economy has double standards, where the public sector workers are adorned with countless raises and benefits, while the private sector is burdened by taxes after taxes. Rachel Reeves is going to drive this country's economy straight into a wall by the way things are looking like. But is there hope? Could the British public expect things to get better?
Do you think that things have to be very bad before you can take really serious reforming action? That's what we had in 1979, and actually this government looks so bad, so failed in its economic policy, 2028-29, the country will be ready for radical reform.
Look, I hope so, and that is absolutely our job. It is bad out there now, Jacob.
Consider this the worsening period before things actually start getting better. Rachel Reeves has done everything she can to prove her incompetence, and eventually the truth came out. Just like that, the British public is waking up and seeing the Labour Party and Rachel Reeves for what they truly are. It's highly likely that she'll be forced to resign over this lying scandal, and the odds are even higher that Labour's definitely not winning the next election. However, to ensure that British people know what's going on, we need to spread awareness on such matters. That's something you can help out with by liking the video and subscribing to the channel.